So just for introductions, I'm Arthur Dessein. I'm the VP of Sales at Impel. We have a merchandising suite, and we enable AI at several thousands of dealerships in the US and in about 17 different countries. And we have here Jeremy, which we don't have to share the mic. Good. Jeremy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey guys, thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
This is Jeremy at Rohrman Automotive Group, 26 stores across Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana. So just to dive into it, we attended a couple sessions that talked about the customer life cycle. And I'm sorry if it's small and it looks crazy complicated. It's kind of meant to be. So this is a good representation of what the journey looks like for a customer, right? So all the pinpoints from when they begin searching for a car to when they submit a lead, to when they buy a car, to when they buy the next car, it shows you all the different touch points, and by extension, all the different vendors and providers, software providers that you might be working with to fulfill that journey, right? It's pretty complex. You have your chat solution, you have your merchandising, you have your mystery shops, you have your lead engagement solutions, you have everything that you're doing in service, you have lease pull ahead, you have equity mining, you have all of these different providers, and none of them talk to one another. All right, so we've heard a couple people talk about like omni-channel, right? When we think like AI in the future I'm talking 12 to 18 months, will allow dealerships to simplify the outreach and finally create kind of a unified way of reaching out to the customer. But a really good snapshot of what you all go through and what the customer goes through and why it's so hard to actually retain a customer for the 3-5 year period they own the car. So there's a term that we use at Impel called organizational drag. We use it internally in how we manage people. But it's also really important for you, for dealerships to know. And here's the textbook definition. But it's really like all of the activities that the staff spends. Think about salespeople, BD agents, service advisors on low value activities, right? Call them low value relative to high value. That is not only consuming their time, but hurting how productive they can be and sucking their energy away. And we think that is probably the most mismanaged thing in a dealership. Not even in a dealership, in just any organization. It's this drag that's caused by the cumulative effect of all those activities that they need to spend time on, which we obviously think AI can help alleviate. So just to walk you through a couple key stats, Jason's heard these, but this number right here is the amount of time that a sales rep or a BD agent, depending on how organized you are, spends on emails, writing emails, sending emails, chasing customers with emails. So out of their day, they're spending 58% of their time on emails, which everybody knows is the lowest converting channel across from text, calls, and emails. So why are they spending so much time? Is they're just following whatever the CRM is telling them, right? Sonny on day 2, send this email. Jeremy on day 4, send this email. So they're spending a disproportionate amount of time on one of the lowest converting channel. And here's the other thing, the CRMs, their delivery rate of emails is only 21%. So think about that. They're spending almost 60%, but 20% are open, which means 80% of the effort, even if they can compose the best email in the world with no grammatical errors, and it was beautifully written and answered the customer's questions, 80% of the time it's not even seen. So you can see this compounded waste and how productive they can be. And so there's additional challenges, and Jeremy's going to touch on what he's seeing at his group, but like assume that you're a dealership and you get 1,000 leads, okay? And this is pretty consistent no matter what dealership you are, Highline, domestic, whether you're in Virginia or Chicago or LA. But like if you're looking at 1,000 leads, half of them come at night. Okay, so you got a problem because these customers aren't getting an answer for 12, 14 hours. So we think there's a huge opportunity for dealerships to use any type of AI to be able to respond to those so they don't have to wait, they don't have to sleep on it. You have 40% that are in the market for longer than 2 weeks. Okay. And I was telling Jeremy this. You can train your staff until you're blue in the face to do long-term follow-up well. It just won't happen. Even our salespeople, they don't do long-term follow-up well. It's just human nature. So they're spending time on things that they're not great at, and it's not an insignificant amount of your leads. It's 40%, so it's a lot, right? And then there's 30% that will never engage with you. So if you look at all your leads that flow into the CRM, 30% don't engage, 70% do, right? Here's the problem. It's twofold. One is you're effectively wasting 30% of your staff's time. So how many total sales reps / BD agents in the Rohrman organization? Do you know off the top of your head?
Oh, well, No, it's not. I mean, honestly, guys, it's not, and gals, it's not too heavy. And so what I'm going to talk about is how AI has helped us to retain staff and not have to grow with staff. A couple things that we've not had to do is we've not had to change since COVID our back to old business hours. We still close in large metro areas, Chicagoland, Indianapolis, Fort Wayne. We still close at 7 o'clock at night and open at 9 in the morning. We're selling more cars than what we carry in cars. We use AI as a leverage for our employees, and we partner with the AI companies to work with our other technology partners. So when you think of the responsibilities and the technology tools that a sales associate has to be integrated with, I just sat here and listened to this one, the prior one, video, text, click to call, send an email, go to your trainings, do all your product knowledge stuff. That's a lot. And now we're expecting them to follow up with tasks. So what we've been able to do is when COVID happened, obviously, we partnered with Impel, I think, in 2022. And what it's done is we've dismantled internet departments. We've repurposed those employees to sales associates, or now just helping to manage handoffs. So at 16 of 23 stores, the net savings is substantial. And those agents are no longer. So our old school mindset, I'm guilty of that, is, hey, let's get 5 or 6 BD agents. Let's give them access to all the customers that they've never sold a car to, they've never penciled a deal, never TO'd a customer, never shook a hand, and never went on a test drive. But now we have an artificial employee that we pay X amount of dollars a month that never calls in, never goes home, always is able to answer the question, and is very efficient in TOing that customer to the sales associate who's going to be handling that opportunity. And I can't remember the term that you use for it, but the conversation that the AI is that is able to carry is very informative, and it's actually just got even more enhanced. So now you have a sales associate who maybe at home at 7:30 at night, he gets this conversation notification that's taking place after hours. The customer's asking specific questions of, hey, can you send me some photos in the vehicle? Can you tell me, does it have a trailer hitch and a sunroof? And the AI is able to grab those photos and say, as a matter of fact, it does have X, Y, and Z. Here are the images that you'd like to look at. Would you like for me to go ahead and schedule an appointment for you? We're currently closed at this time, but we open back up at 9 a.m. tomorrow. That's a sales associate's enjoying his family time. He then comes back in at 9 a.m. in the morning. He has an appointment already set in the CRM. A majority of our appointments are set after 7 o'clock at night. And a lot of times, dealerships, unless you're still running full staff bell to bell, those are typically your shorter hours. So we don't have those hiccups. So when we talk about engagements, they don't have to do as much. Now, what the AI has done is send out a text message and an email. The customer responds back, let's say, through text message. It's found out that level of engagement. How does the customer like to communicate? And then that conversation then carries on only in text message only. So when the sales associate comes in, he's able to click the link in the notes and activity, see what the conversation took place, disable the AI, and then introduce himself as saying, hey, this is Jeremy with the Roman Group. I see that Megan, who's our AI agent, was able to answer some questions for you overnight. I'm going to be the one who's going to be checking availability. I'm going to make you a quick video and send you over an information packet with all the details on the vehicle. Now, you can take it a step further, which is what we did with our partnership. And we use iPacket. So we got the two companies together and said, hey, we want you to automatically send out a packet as soon as the lead falls into the CRM. So the lead falls into the CRM. The customer now gets a greeting from Megan that says, hey, one of our sales associates is going to check availability on the vehicle. In the meantime, here's an information packet with all the details, including Carfax, XYZ, everything else. We're going to be in touch soon. So now my sales associate, the only thing he has to do is come in, open up the iPacket, see what did the customer look at, introduce himself as assisting Megan, and how can I answer your additional questions.
And if I could jump into that point. So like AI, like everybody's, I'm sure, played with GPT-3 or GPT-4 and asked it some stuff, and it creates great content. Like the conversations are pretty spectacular that they can have. Here's a really good example of an illustration of what Jeremy said, which is AI assisting the salesperson, and we'll get to service in a second, in their day-to-day responsibilities so they're more productive. So here's, by the way, this number, these activities required per unit sold, means nothing, right? This is just like a unit of, like if I said, how much, what is the baseline for productivity for a rep? It would be, generally they need 60 actions per car sold. Again, it doesn't mean that if you do 68, the car is going to sell, but it's a baseline. right? This is like without AI, right? This is like a rep working, having to do everything from A to Z, from responding to lead, chasing the lead down, sending them information, booking the appointment, doing all that work. Now, when you look at sales rep performance with AI and you measure, it's the same people, right? Pre and post, they're not different skill set. These are the better ones. So we look at the best, the medium, and then the worst. And this is like a sub-segment of the best reps. You look at some of the key things. They're able to work more leads. They're able to make a lot more phone calls. They're spending way less time on emails. What's important is they're spending a lot less activities per vehicle sold. So again, it doesn't mean much other than when AI is introduced, they're working a lot more efficiently in getting the car sold. So think about like this bell curve. They don't have to work the low-hanging fruit and waste their time on getting appointments set because it's automatically setting it for them and you don't have to allocate a single minute of human resources. And they don't have to spend as much time in the long-term follow-up, which is really not a great use of their time. Jeremy and I differ on this. I think like if there's a staff member that's spending a minute on somebody that hasn't engaged in 30 days, probably not a great use of that minute. Had they spend one more minute extra on diligence on a lead that just came in, that's probably more productive. But then if they can focus on the middle, they end up becoming a lot more efficient. And collectively, so if you take the collective impact on teams at the dealership that AI-empowered teams can have, here's some key stats. So when we're looking at this, we look at when dealership groups introduce AI. It could be Impel's AI, it could be really any AI. But if you're looking at AI that can answer customers' questions, drive them down the funnel, is integrated with the CRMs, can book appointments, can do a lot of the stuff that's time-consuming, the staff is going to be writing a lot less emails. Ideally, and Jason's sitting at CMA, I've told you this from the beginning, in my view, they should be writing 0 emails, period, ever, because they're not being delivered, they're full of typos, they're not timely, they don't answer the customer, there's all sorts of stuff, right? But obviously, I'm saying it in jest to a degree. But then look at this. I know their numbers are really small, but what this is showing is that there's a 30-40% decrease in emails that the teams are sending, but there's a proportional increase in number of calls that they're making. So one big piece of feedback that we get from groups is, well, we don't want our people becoming lazy. We don't want them sitting around having nothing to do. That's not what's happening. What's happening is in the CRM, you could tell them, instead of spending 20 minutes writing this email, you can now make those 3 phone calls that you didn't otherwise have time for. And that we see combined with the decrease in emails, increase in phone calls, the total output, so the total outreach by the AI and the humans together chasing a lead quadruples. That combined is increasing the appointment set rate pretty significantly and pretty consistently across groups. Okay? So that's what often is missed. I think it's more of like, look, we could show you great conversations. That's all great and fine. I think it's the impact that AI will have on your teams. Again, energy, time, and productivity. So on service, what's really kind of interesting on this is, and I asked Jeremy, but I don't think you know, again, off the top of your head, how many records you have across 26 stores.
Hundreds of thousands, millions.
Hundreds, maybe a million. You know, the number is gargantuan. Right? It's huge. It's enormous. And so we think the service department is really ripe for automation, especially if it's AI driven. And I'll show you what I'm talking about in a second. But here's like the traditional model, all right? And I'm generalizing, but here's the typical model. You have a dealership, you have 50,000 records, they live in the DMS, you have an agency, or you have service BDC maybe, but mainly they're playing defense, right? They're barely able to field all the phone calls incoming. And so there's no one that's proactively reaching out to those 50,000 customers, letting them know they're due for first, they're due for next, their state inspections coming up, they have a recall on their car. Typically, maybe you upload a list and you have to hammer out the phone calls. It's not a super efficient way of making sure that they don't defect and end up changing their oil or changing their tires at the local independent shop. So the AI-enabled retention model that we've seen groups have a lot of success with is you plug in an AI in the DMS, and you let AI mine the data. There's a lot of talk too about CDPs. I think a lot of groups are aiming and working towards CDPs. You still need to be able to activate the data. Same thing as the DMS. You have all this data, and it's stuck in the DMS, and groups are trying to push all the data into CDP, but you still need something to be able to act on that data. It's the same thing that's happening in DMS. It's really hard. There's 50,000 records. How in the hell are you going to be able to reach out to every single one of them? It's impossible. So we think AI can mine all the DMS, figure out who's due for what, predictively, proactively, do the outreach, do the follow-up, conversationally, and get them booked for service. And then have your teams focused on, because everybody knows half the phone calls coming in are vehicle status checks, not necessarily I need to bring my car in. So we think there's this, well, sales, and you could agree or disagree, Jeremy, but for sales, I think AI is more towards either helping people do more with less, helping organizations like streamline, or assisting them because you have too much volume. For service, I don't think it's a replacement of anyone. I think for service, everybody's drowning and you have so many records that it's actually kind of providing a boost in your ability to do outreach. And I actually have kind of an example of the customer journey. So here's kind of like, I think the average, I have one that's 6 years, but Jeremy, you told me now the average, and I forget what you told me, that the most recent thing was 11 years or something crazy that the average person is holding onto a vehicle for. So what used to be 3-4 years is now like 10 years. So it's even harder for retention. But look at this. This is the average kind of like 6-year span, right? You have your pit stop, your first service, your next service. You have all the multitude of services that exist. Then you have like your state inspection. They decline brake work. Then they have a recall on their car. They have a next service again. Then they have like it's endless, right? And that's just one customer. And think about the number of people that you have in your DMS. It's thousands. So there's a lot of investments going into internet leads, like BDCs, hiring Impel products, software, et cetera. That typical dealer gets like 500 leads, and you're selling a car once, and that's already hard to manage. Service, you have 50 times the amount, 55 times the amount of records in your DMS than you get internet leads on a monthly basis. And that person probably needs to be reminded multiple times every year for 6-10 years. So you can see how it becomes insurmountable and why AI is actually like perfect for the service drive. And I'm gonna walk through this, and I'd love for you to walk through kind of what your group has seen with AI in the service drives. But here's the other thing. Okay, so you have a ton of records in your DMS, which is way too high for you all to be able to reach out to proactively, so you don't, right, and end up defecting, or you spend a lot of money in marketing and direct mail, and a lot of the data's dirty. But here's what we found is, on average, it takes 3.9, so basically 4, it takes 4 outreach before the person even responds. Okay, so it's not even like, say you had the perfect solution that reached out to Jeremy and to Sonny perfectly when they're coming due every single time. None of them would probably answer. It requires 4 outreach for the average engagement. And in fact, if you look at these, I know it's very small. I apologize. I thought we were going to have a bigger screen. But abandoned customers, that takes 5 messages. And those are more than 50% of the records in the DMS. Right? So what we're seeing is not only is the volume of outreach so great, but the number of messages that needs to go out to even engage them becomes like exponentially larger. So take a look at this. 50,000 records. 4 messages before they engage. That means you have to send them 200,000 messages. And if you equate that to like 3 minutes an outreach, say it takes you 3 minutes to do all your research, grab the email, compose the email, and send the email, which is actually pretty conservative, it would essentially require 100,000 man hours to be able to do the outreach that you need if you have 50,000 records. And so that's why we think AI is really, really important to fix up. It allows you and enables you to do that outreach at scale, and allows you to do the outreach in a really, truly personalized fashion. So I know Jeremy's got his group on AI. I'd love for you to talk about like what they've seen. I have data, by the way, that I want to show you on the impact of AI in service in terms of customer retention and growth that I'll show in a second. Maybe Jeremy, you can share some findings that you've found specifically for your group.
I want to do one last touch on the variable side. So when in the last class, they were talking about the speed of the sale. And so we pull our data. We're data freaks. You two can attest to that, right? And if Liza was in here, she'd tell you as well, because she's in our super group for NADA. And to be in that, you have to have over $1 billion in gross sales a year. So we focus a lot on our data. So I'd question a couple of you guys, like, go back and challenge your data. Like, when was the last time a sales process was updated, right? Inside of phone ups, internet walking. Oh, sorry. I would challenge to like, when was the last time your sales processes were updated with internet, phone, and walk-in? Have you changed that since COVID wasn't a thing? And how many things have also adjusted since COVID was around? Microchip shortage, shortages of vehicles, trade values as high as retail values. So there's a lot of things that you can adjust to it. But what you're trying to do is you're actually throwing a lot of work on your salespeople if none of that's been adjusted. So what we've done is we've adjusted our processes to align with the 51-day follow-up cadence that Impel offers. So as long as the lead is still considered active in the CRM, their follow-up will continue. Our sales guys only have to worry about those touch points of those customers that have actually responded to the lead. And we know 60-70% of consumers don't respond. It's helped us to grow our sold in time frame percentage from 8%, 9%, which is a national average. We just had our QBR meeting last week. They flew out. We're actually double, and then some stores are triple what national average is on sold in time frame, because our associates are able to dive in much sooner, provide that experience. So when Steve was talking about videos, we've made 22,000 videos this year. They've been viewed 20,000 times. The customers get an iPacket 100% of the time. They open it 85% of the time. So we've covered all the bases. Now we need to do is just not fumble the appointment, which they're setting 30% of them for us during and after business hours. Very slick. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. As for service, we just launched our 11th store because we don't want to do a mass rollout. We want to make sure that the handoffs are handled properly and the staff is trained accordingly to where we do not overbook. So with the service AI, we had to throttle it down. So we did a test launch at one of the stores, like how many opportunities is the store going to get? They're booming. Honestly, they have service records that are broken month in and month out. And that's something where you find out, what do I want to pursue? Do I want to pursue lost customers? Do I want to pursue sold but never serviced customers? Do I want to pursue recall opportunities? And with that, we've now graduated that store to follow up on 10 different things and now CSI. The other stores have all launched over the past 3 months, and they're all having that same initial success as what the original store did. So we're going to roll into a centralized handoff center. And the centralized handoff center will manage those customers that are very few that do have questions on our touch points, because a lot of those customers are customers that we never sold or serviced, but they bought the car off of an individual down the street, and we were able to target those customers as well. So there's a lot of cool things that it's helped us to do. And now you think of the generative dollars that are actually coming into your service department, it's paying for the product, and we're picking up new customers. So very slick.
Yeah, and one of the objections that we get, okay, so we might be presenting to a dealership group and we say, look, here's AI for service. And sometimes we get the response of, well, I'm so booked, like I don't need any more business, right? And that's all, we probably get that half the time, right? Like my service drive, so I'm like booked 6 weeks out. That misses the point of and there's a lot of discussions here and there were a lot of sessions on managing the life cycle. The problem is, if you don't proactively reach out to somebody, and I know everybody owns a car here, and hopefully for some of you dealers, you probably have it, like you don't own it like a regular consumer, but if you do, think about the last time the dealership that you bought it from proactively reached out to you and said, hey, Sonny, look, your car's coming due for service in the next few weeks. Let's get you booked and you'll have your best, you can select your favorite appointment time in 5 weeks. It's never happened for me. It doesn't exist. It's really hard to do at scale. But imagine the power of, yes, you may not need it now, but what happens is the check engine light comes on. Then you get the list from the OEM, and then you got to assign 20 people to make those phone calls. Imagine before the check engine light comes on, we're telling the customer that it's going to come on, he's coming due, and booking him 6 weeks in advance. So we get that objection a lot, which is a fair objection, but we think it misses the point of managing the customer, because ultimately he's going to call, and ultimately you have call overflow. And a lot of those calls are either they're checking the status of their car, which is half of the calls that you're getting, and the other half is, I got to come in because my check engine light's on. So the reason they're calling is the same reason why you should think about AI. Again, we love for it to be Impel AI. It should be honestly any AI that can go into DMS and say, I'm going to reach out to Sonny before he's coming due so he doesn't have to make that inbound phone call, which, by the way, most people hate to do. I hate having to call anybody for an appointment. I'd much rather just being able to do it online. But the service schedulers, weren't built to be service schedulers. So like they're fairly kind of like clunky in scheduling service. So they end up calling. So we really do think that AI can actually not only help retain customers for longer and increase customer paid ROs, but it allows you to actually better manage your people's time as well in service. So they're not sucked into all these phone calls that weren't necessarily needed. So I promised some data. This is a really bad color scheme by our marketing Alexis. So, but here's about 20 roughly dealership groups of various sizes, 6 stores or higher, across the US that have deployed AI in the DMS to help them with retention. And what we measured is what is the actual impact on total ROs processed, right? Which is kind of like a rough measure of retention. The more ROs you get, ultimately, the more customers are coming in. Ultimately, the higher you retain customers. Ideally, what you want to see is if you sold 100 cars today, are more people servicing with you in 18 months versus when you sold 100 cars 18 months ago. You get that from the OEM, but I think it's too late at that point. It's a 90-day look back. So ideally, we should be able to dive into that data soon, but we're looking at growth in total ROs. So on the average, and the average is a bit misleading, so you can see in the yellow here the direct impacts at some of these 20 groups. The average impact is about 28% increase in total ROs closed, customer paid. So it's pretty significant. And it's not rocket science. Like most customers, for sales, it's very kind of like nuanced. You got to convince them about a car. A Ford Explorer is a Ford Explorer. What's different? You got to convince them to buy a car. You got to convince them about the price. For service, what we found, it's just an exercise of reminding the customer that he's coming due for service, and they will come in at a much higher rate. And so it's not rocket science like internet sales, a bit more nuanced. This is strictly much more transactional. So just like as a quick overview on the variable and the sales end, again, 2 different kind of sides of the business, same AI, and I would have loved to have shown, Jeremy said we should show some conversation that the AI can have, and those are all great. I think it can respond fast, right? It can give you the ability to text where you might not have the ability in the CRM. It can answer questions that either the human can, but we don't have to waste their time, or the human can't, that the AI can, and vice versa. But we think the biggest impact is, especially if you have multiple stores, is what you can do by either giving some of their time back so they can spend more time on, say, making phone calls, or oftentimes what we see with larger dealership group is the reallocation of that position into doing something else, like vehicle acquisition, for instance, or equity mining, which is a really high turnover position. So there's a couple ways that several groups are taking. And on service, we think it is the most revenue producing application of AI that you can have, because there's more money, as you all would know and agree, there's more money living, sitting, kind of trapped in the DMS than anything you can do on the variable side. And we think they've just been untouched, they've not been reminded, and the independent ones are just sucking them away for the silly reason that they're not being proactively reached out to. So we think that is more of of doing what you might be trying to do with several different marketing pieces with maybe your agencies or different providers that may provide one solution, but that can't do the whole life cycle management. So that's kind of a short presentation. We're trying to keep it under 25 minutes. I know it's coming with happy hour, but any questions at all on AI, sales, service, anything like that? How Jeremy got so jacked? Yeah.
Migrating towards the blockchain and eliminating third parties in the future?
I have a controversial stance on this too. Probably not a great. I had a slide that I edited that kind of went to answer that question to some degree, but then I realized that the presentation was already submitted. So just as that complex journey, right? Everybody's building, like I said, CDPs. They're all going to kind of coalesce their data in one place. Honestly, I think in 18 months or 22 months, or how rapidly it evolves, AI would be able to go fetch the data in all the different repositories and do it for you without the investment in structural infrastructure that you need for CDPs. That's my view. A lot of people say, well, you need the data to be in a single kind of spot to be able to activate it. I think it can, because most people think AI is just like the text that you get, right? The conversational nature of it. AI has been around for decades, and it's all about like the processing and how it can do tasks much more quickly. So yes, I think it could disintermediate a lot of different providers and people. and efforts that some groups may be going through. Any other questions? By the way, I know this is a big CDP conference too, so I hope.
So I look at his view differently. So for me, I'll let AI manage all third parties, every lead provider out there, and then identify the lead sources that I don't want it to work. So for me, a digital retailing lead is a very high quality lead. So I'll turn that lead source off inside of Impel, and then it allows the salesperson to properly handle that customer the right way. Instead of saying, hey, I'm going to check availability and I'll get back with you, it now says, hey, Mr. Customer, I see that you were able to build your loan online. You selected this vehicle, you selected this term. So I'm actually working with Jackie and Car Gurus on building out that digital trading platform to roll out across the industry and the group, because I think that that's more valuable to handle that type of customer. So now you're picking up that customer, giving them a digital handshake, walking them all the way through the front door, and it's ready to go. Now, if they have technology that adapts to that, that's awesome. But I, for now, I think that it can handle the majority and not the small amount that are truly engaged.
Any other questions? Yes.
So when it comes to bringing the data in, we all know dealers' data is all over the place. How do your dealers tell you this column, this information comes from this place? Are you only pulling data from one source, or are you pulling it from multiple sources?
Yeah, I mean, right now the sources would be the CRM, the DMSs. Is this on? Yes. Yeah. The CRM, the DMSs, the inventory feed, the OEM build data, right? The different providers that may provide data around the vehicle. On the customer record, it's going to either live in the CRM or the DMS. So to go back to what I was talking about, I think one of the pitfalls of what I was talking about is the integrations need to exist. If, like, say you don't do a CDP, for instance, the integrations need to exist for AI to go and fetch that information, act like your de facto CDP. Those integrations right now are CRM and DMS centric, and then all the third-party stuff that you can apply to it. Does that answer your question, kind of?
How do you identify which source wins for each piece of information?
Right, so it depends. So this is a good representation, this chart here, where the customer is. And then, so if they submit a lead, you may be looking in the DMS to see if it's a repeat customer, or if it's not, if it's in the CRM, that information would be accessed by the AI, because they all have great APIs where they have a lot of data that flows pretty freely. So for instance, depending on where they are in that journey, you would know that that data lives in this system or needs to be enhanced with other data in the system. So for instance, we grab data from both the CRM and the DMS to figure out how to either respond or how to reach out to the customer in the first place. It keeps getting better. It's not limited, but it's not perfect, but it's much closer to managing the life cycle in a cohesive way than what's currently being done.
One good example is, and this is just a 6-month date range, 24,999 engagements, 9.12% engagement rate with a 38% appointment set rate to get a customer back in the service department. So a total RO count of 876. And keep in mind, I've only had one store on for 6 months. The other ones just got on 3 months ago. And that was completely throttled down when we first rolled it out. So the numbers are just crazy, because if any of you do work at a store, you represent stores, if a customer turned down a brake job last Friday, or they turned down a flush or a tire rotation, whatever they turned down, did somebody from your store call them between Friday and today to ask them why they turned that service down? Or do you think that customer went out and shopped to see where they could get the better value at? We have somebody that's now doing it for us. I don't have to depend on somebody to avoid a phone call. It's done.
Yeah.
I find that AI answers most questions better than most salespeople and service.
Yes.
So why do you think there's a 60% ghosting rate? I would think that the engagements would be fewer for the dealership, because customers are going directly to AI to get their questions answered. Why do you think there's a 60% ghosting rate on these inquiries?
On just customer leads in general?
I'm curious, a lot of times I think customers go to find out information and they're not ready to buy, and so they just kind of stand back. Why not go to AI first as a customer?
So,
and then make the lead when I'm ready to buy?
well, your chat is your AI for most stores, right? That's your version of AI. For your lead that falls into the CRM, there's two ways of looking at your question. If the lead falls into the CRM and the customer never answers the phone or responds to a text message, or just ghosts the salesperson altogether, he walks up to the desk and says, hey, I need this lead marked lost after 7 days or 5 days, right? But if that customer is still truly in market, and we can see this too, if that customer responded to an email from AI after 10 days, it re-alerts us and puts the customer back in engagement. And now it's a handoff. So what will happen is we'll actually shut that salesperson off. So he requested to be taken off that. He didn't want to continue to pursue it. It now goes into a lost process in the CRM, but the AI continues the engagement. Our BD coordinator or the sales manager will get the notification saying, hey, this customer has questions, and we actually flip it to a completely different salesperson that wants to work it.
An extension to your question, which is you can't control, they were definitely going to do research on their own. It's what happens after they submitted a lead. Because once they submit a lead, you have their PII, you should be contacting them. And we think leveraging AI to do a lot of that grunt work is much more efficient than having a staff of 20 do it. And by the way, most of you, every single one, if you're a dealership, your vendors, I'm sure AI is plastered everywhere. AI XYZ, AI ABC, it's everywhere. It's kind of been, unfortunately, bastardized a little bit. And you may hear GPT. If I ask for a raise of hand, how many of your vendors mention GPT? It's probably a lot. The session originally was going to be about kind of like how that isn't so great on its own because it's riddled with issues that would be highly detrimental to the dealership. But if you have vendors that say, look, we're going to use this AI generative stuff, what's important, and you should ask them this, is are you using those models, right, which are public, which the thing will create all sorts of information. We've experienced it ourselves. But are you marrying those models, right, which is like GPT, Chat GPT that you've all probably played with local models, so your own dealership models where you can actually provide accurate information and you're not relying on something to generate an answer completely out of the blue about the price of the vehicle, which could price the vehicle at $1,000, right, depending on if the AI gets tricked. So it's really important to be able to have this marriage of you're using a lot of large language models, which are not restricted to just Chat GPT, just Anthropic, there's Google, there's all of them releasing them publicly, but then also local models, which are really, really important in prompting the AI to answer correctly. A little technical, but a question that you should probably ask, especially as we see the chat incumbent providers kind of touting a lot of GPT stuff. A good question to ask is, are you also using some of my data to enhance the answers that the AI gives?
Does your AI respond in the consumer's native language? Is that an option?
Short answer right now is no. On the roadmap, probably next 8 months to do it correctly. It can understand, but it doesn't respond in it. There's a lot of cost involved. Like, people don't realize how costly it is to actually answer via AI. So it's a lot of the technology is available. It's just sometimes cost prohibitive.